At her brother's wedding, she caught her husband with her sister-in-law. She looked at the groom. He smiled and said, "Don't worry. The real show is about to begin." Hi, my beautiful family. May the Almighty wrap every woman in a protection that no pain can break, a peace that no storm can shake, and a love that holds her like warm sunlight. May He cleanse her heart from heaviness, remove every hidden sorrow, and replace every wound with pure strength and dignity. May every woman in this family rise like a blooming garden, respected, cherished, and honored in every moment of her life. She is not just a part of the home, she is the home. She is not just important, she is irreplaceable. And may your families be surrounded by blessings that flow without stopping, health that lasts, happiness that stays, and success that follows gently like a shadow of light. May your steps be guided, your nights be restful, and your hearts never feel alone. If your heart is true, like the video, if your love is real, right, I am with Mr. Peter. Some betrayals arrive with warning signs, telegraphing their approach through changes in behavior and shifts in affection. Others walk through the door, wearing a smile and your husband's cologne, catching you completely unprepared for the devastation they're about to unleash. Nova Bennett understood power in ways most people would never comprehend. She transformed a failing company hemorrhaging money into an empire that stretched across 3 continents, negotiated deals that made seasoned executives with decades of experience nervous enough to sweat through expensive suits, commanded respect in boardrooms specifically designed to exclude women who looked like her. Tonight, emerald silk clung to her curves like liquid starlight caught in fabric form. The material so expensive it had been hand-selected from a private collection in Milan. Her natural hair had been sculpted into an elaborate crown that required 3 different artists and 6 hours of patient work, each coil and curl positioned with architectural precision. Diamonds caught every flicker of candlelight as she moved through the riverside estate, a venue she'd personally selected after touring 15 different locations, and financed without blinking at the 6-figure price tag for her baby brother's celebration. Desmond was marrying the love of his life, and Nova had ensured this wedding would be remembered by everyone in attendance for the rest of their lives. She just didn't anticipate how those memories would burn like acid when recalled. "You've completely outdone yourself, sis," Desmond murmured beside the champagne fountain that had cost more than most luxury sedans, watching 300 impeccably dressed guests dance beneath Austrian crystal chandeliers that caught light and transformed it into something magical. His bride Priya floated past them in a dress that seemed to capture and transform light into pure starlight, her face radiating the kind of joy that made even cynics reconsider their positions on love and commitment. The 12-piece orchestra filled the massive ballroom with melodies so perfectly executed they could make even the most hardened hearts soften. Nova squeezed her brother's hand with genuine affection, feeling pride swell in her chest until it felt almost painful. "You deserve every single beautiful thing this world has to offer. Both of you earned this happiness after everything you've been through together." Michael's supposed to give his best man toast in exactly 5 minutes. "Have you seen him anywhere? People are starting to notice his absence." The question dropped into Nova's chest, like a stone thrown through perfectly still water, creating ripples of unease that spread through her entire body with uncomfortable speed. She scanned the opulent ballroom with the kind of precision that had made her legendary in business negotiations across 3 continents, cataloging every single face with the photographic accuracy that had served her so well in hostile takeovers. Her parents occupied the family table draped in ivory linens that cost hundreds per yard, her mother's elegant fingers resting gently on her father's arm, both of them glowing with the kind of parental pride that comes from watching your children achieve their dreams. Priya's relatives mingled easily with cousins Nova had personally flown in from 4 different states, covering every single expense without a moment's hesitation because family mattered more than money ever could. The orchestra transitioned seamlessly into something jazzy and upbeat, and couples flooded the dance floor with enthusiasm. But her husband had completely vanished from sight, probably handling some urgent work call that couldn't wait, Nova offered, though the lie tasted like ash and battery acid combined. Michael was a competent enough lawyer who talked considerably more about winning cases than he actually won them in reality, coasting almost entirely on her hard-earned connections and her reputation rather than developing any real talent of his own. She'd loved him anyway, or at least convinced herself she had, building an entire life around the comfortable illusion that reliable and steady mattered infinitely more than passionate and unpredictable. 4 years of marriage, 4 years of coming home to someone who seemed perfectly content occupying her shadow, letting her carry every single burden while he drifted through their shared life like a passenger rather than a partner. She deliberately ignored, accumulating evidence that should have alarmed her months ago, his gaze perpetually sliding away whenever she sought genuine emotional connection. His increasingly convenient late nights at the office whenever she needed meaningful conversation about their future. His touch that felt mechanical rather than meaningful, born from obligation instead of actual desire, going through motions rather than sharing passion. "Let me find him and see what's going on," Nova said, her designer heels clicking measured rhythms against imported marble floors. She navigated through the crowded ballroom like water finding microscopic cracks in stone, her mere presence commanding attention even as she attempted discretion and subtlety. Well-meaning guests tried repeatedly stopping her for effusive compliments about the spectacular wedding, transparent networking opportunities they hoped she wouldn't notice, probing questions about her company's latest expansion plans. But she deflected everything with the practiced grace born from years spent negotiating hostile corporate takeovers, having learned long ago how to project perfect calm while anxiety clawed viciously at her insides. The guest wing stretched ahead down a corridor of polished mahogany doors, lining expensive silence, broken only by the distant sound of music and celebration. Soft amber lighting created dancing shadows on silk-covered walls, displaying original artwork worth more than most people's annual salaries. Her instincts screamed increasingly urgent warnings, that primal knowing buried deep in her bones that something fundamental and irreversible was currently shattering. She'd watched Michael head precisely this direction earlier, his tuxedo jacket slung carelessly across his shoulder like he was leaving a college party, his phone pressed urgently against his ear, his expression radiating the kind of irritation usually reserved for genuine emergencies. He'd physically waved her off when she'd approached to ask if everything was all right, mouthing important call alongside a dismissive look that actively discouraged any questions, that made her feel like an unwanted interruption rather than his concerned wife. The first door refused her exploratory touch, locked tight with no light visible beneath. The second opened smoothly to reveal nothing but darkness and furniture, arranged precisely for guests who hadn't yet arrived. The third room revealed an unused bedroom, carrying distinct traces of expensive perfume that made her pause mid-step, made her wonder whose scent lingered here, made her pulse accelerate uncomfortably. The fourth door stood slightly ajar, warm light spilling through the gap like a golden invitation to absolute devastation. Nova pushed it wider with agonizing slowness, her tactical mind already constructing increasingly elaborate explanations that might somehow survive logical scrutiny. Maybe he'd catastrophically spilled red wine on his pristine white shirt and desperately needed privacy to change before giving his speech. Maybe that supposedly important call demanded complete isolation away from music and celebration. Maybe he'd suddenly felt violently ill and needed to lie down briefly before facing 300 expectant guests, every single maybe shattered simultaneously into razor-sharp, fragments that would cut her soul. Repeatedly, Michael occupied the silk-covered bed, his previously immaculate shirt hanging completely open and exposing his chest. His usually meticulously styled hair messed up exactly like someone had run eager fingers through it, repeatedly during passionate activity. Wilma sprawled beneath him, in a position leaving absolutely nothing to imagination. Desmond's own sister, the woman who'd served as maid of honor and stood at that altar merely hours ago, solemnly promising to support and protect this sacred marriage, who'd embraced Nova warmly that very morning, while calling her the sister she'd always wanted and never had. Expensive silk sheets tangled elaborately around their partially clothed bodies, while her bridesmaid dress lay crumpled and discarded on the floor like abandoned hope. His designer tuxedo jacket thrown carelessly nearby, their bodies pressed together with zero possible ambiguity, zero conceivable innocent interpretation available to anyone with functioning eyes. Nova stood frozen in that doorway, while something deep inside her chest went completely, utterly, devastatingly silent. Not her heart breaking dramatically, because breaking hearts made theatrical noise, demanded immediate acknowledgement from witnesses, required validation from others. This felt profoundly different. This was her entire carefully constructed foundation, simultaneously discovering it had been built entirely on unstable sand. Watching every structure she'd painstakingly built over 4 years crumble in horrible slow motion, while she remained completely powerless to prevent the collapse. Michael noticed her frozen presence first. His eyes expanded with pure, undiluted panic, his mouth forming her name in a soundless gasp of horror, his hands scrambling desperately to cover himself, to somehow cover Wilma, to magically transform this scene into literally anything except exactly what it so obviously was. Wilma gasped sharply, a sound trapped precisely between genuine surprise and dawning horror, her lipstick thoroughly smeared across her guilty face, like damning crime scene evidence under police lights. Her mascara slightly disturbed at both corners from their activities. Nova didn't scream or cry or demand immediate explanations or throw justified accusations. She didn't collapse theatrically the way women always did in romantic films, when discovering their husbands actively engaged with other women, when their entire worlds imploded in spectacular cinematic fashion designed for maximum emotional impact. Instead, she reached calmly into her expensive evening clutch with hands that remained perfectly steady, retrieving her phone with the kind of surgical precision she applied to hostile business negotiations. "Nova, wait, this absolutely isn't what you think it is," Michael started desperately, raw panic cracking his voice into pathetic pieces. She captured the first damning photo, the camera flash flooding the entire room like lightning illuminating a crime scene. The angle was absolutely perfect, the visual evidence completely irrefutable in any conceivable legal proceeding. "Baby, please just let me explain everything. It was a terrible mistake. It didn't mean anything at all." Second devastating photo from a strategically different position. Perfect insurance for the approaching war she was already mentally planning. Wilma attempted forming words, tried desperately saying something that might possibly matter or justify or explain away the inexplicable. But Nova raised one authoritative finger with the exact same commanding gesture that routinely silenced entire boardrooms full of overconfident men who'd foolishly attempted talking over her. Third, comprehensive. Photo capturing both of their faces with perfect clarity, complete with timestamps and digital metadata that would stand up flawlessly in any court of law. Then she pivoted smoothly and departed on designer heels, maintaining their earlier measured rhythm, her breathing remaining impressively controlled. Her hands finally achieving complete steadiness now that she possessed irrefutable documented proof. She reached deep into some previously unknown reserve of inner strength and extracted enough composed dignity to cross that lengthy corridor without breaking into a run, to enter the crowded ballroom without releasing the scream building in her throat. to navigate smoothly through dancing guests and clinking champagne. Glasses and joyful celebration that suddenly felt like deliberate mockery of everything she'd believed about love and commitment and forever. Desmond saw, straight past her carefully maintained mask, the absolute instant she emerged from that corridor. Not the meticulously constructed facade she routinely wore for strangers and corporate competitors, and people who genuinely thought powerful women couldn't possibly harbor feelings deep enough to cause real pain. He saw directly past the expensive emerald silk and the glittering diamond earrings and the carefully applied makeup that had probably cost more than most people spent on their entire wedding. Straight through to the utter devastation churning underneath. He intercepted her halfway across the polished ballroom floor, his protective hand immediately finding her elbow, his larger body angling strategically to shield her from increasingly curious observers who sensed something was desperately wrong. What happened? Talk to me right now. Nova leaned close, positioning her lips near his ear for absolute privacy. Michael and Wilma, guest wing, fourth door on the left side, in bed together. I have multiple photographs as evidence. Desmond's entire muscular frame went rigid beneath his custom-tailored tuxedo. She felt every muscle tensing like tightly coiled springs preparing to release. Felt the protective fury radiating off him in almost visible waves that would absolutely terrorize anyone paying close attention to his body language. But when he pulled back to actually look at her face, he was smiling, not with any trace of happiness or brotherly kindness, but with something dark promising severe consequences, something understanding exactly what needed happening next. Something that made Nova's spine straighten slightly with renewed determination. Don't worry. Sis, Desmond said with absolute certainty that made something painful in Nova's chest unclench just slightly. The real show is about to begin right now. I've got you. I've always got you, and I always will. He kissed her cheek with genuine sibling affection, squeezed her hand once in fierce solidarity, then walked with purpose toward the front of the ballroom, where the microphone waited patiently for speeches, supposedly celebrating love and commitment, and all the beautiful lies people told themselves about forever. Nova returned to the family table, covered in the finest linens money could purchase. Her mother looked immediately concerned, but Nova shook her head slightly, silently requesting patience and trust. Michael stumbled back into the ballroom, looking thoroughly rumpled and obviously panicked. His hair disheveled in ways that couldn't be explained by wind, his tuxedo sitting crooked, sweat beading visibly on his forehead despite the perfectly maintained air conditioning. Wilma appeared mere moments later, her dress hastily adjusted but still obviously wrong to anyone paying attention, her lipstick smudged in ways that told crystal-clear stories to observant eyes, her gaze darting frantically around the room like trapped prey seeking non-existent exits. Desmond lifted a fork and clinked his champagne glass deliberately, the sharp sound slicing through music and animated conversation like a heated blade through silk. Ladies and gentlemen, may I please have your complete attention? It's time for our speeches. Michael, my supposed best man, would you like to start us off? Nova lifted her champagne glass slowly to her lips and mentally prepared to watch her husband's entire world ignite and burn. Chapter 2, The Brothers' Revenge. Michael's visibly trembling hands accepted the microphone from Desmond's steady grip, and Nova catalogued every microscopic detail with the kind of hyper-awareness that only comes from experiencing profound emotional shock. Damp fingerprints marked the polished metal surface where his sweating palms made contact. His throat worked overtime, swallowing absolutely nothing, his Adam's apple bobbing frantically like someone drowning. His bloodshot eyes absolutely couldn't locate hers anywhere in the crowd. Couldn't possibly face the woman he'd just so thoroughly and publicly betrayed. He cleared his throat repeatedly, once, twice, 3 desperate times, like a man who'd completely forgotten how basic breathing functioned properly. I've known Desmond since our freshman year of college. Michael began weakly, his voice fracturing noticeably on the second word like ice breaking under excessive weight. He's been my absolute closest friend, my brother in everything but blood, someone who always supported me regardless of circumstances or challenges. The bitter irony wasn't remotely lost on Nova, sitting there, clutching irrefutable photographic evidence of his spectacular betrayal in her phone. Her brother had steadfastly supported him right up until the precise moment Michael decided sleeping with his sister constituted acceptable behavior. Somehow, Michael stumbled awkwardly through painfully generic platitudes about friendship and commitment, empty words that carried absolutely zero meaningful weight, coming from lips that had kissed another woman less than 60 minutes ago, that had whispered God knows what, while Nova stood a mere 30 feet away, celebrating her beloved brother's wedding. Sweat streamed steadily down his temple in glistening rivulets. His expensive jacket hung completely wrong on his shoulders. Every single person present could sense something was desperately, fundamentally off, could feel the uncomfortable tension crackling through the air like dangerous electricity preceding massive, destructive storms. His pathetic excuse for a speech finally ended to confused and notably sparse applause that died quickly. Well-dressed guests exchanged increasingly concerned glances with their partners, whispered urgent questions to their neighbors, sensed the pervasive wrongness permeating the celebration without comprehending its horrifying source. Desmond stood smoothly with practiced grace, reclaiming the microphone with a smile absolutely capable of freezing hell solid and making the devil himself uncomfortable. "Thank you so much, Michael. That was truly memorable in ways you can't possibly imagine. Now let's hear from our beautiful maid of honor, my dear sister Wilma." Wilma approached the stage on visibly shaking legs, each uncertain step looking like it might be her absolute last before complete collapse. Her previously flawless makeup absolutely couldn't hide the guilty flush staining her cheeks bright red, the smudged mascara at the corner of her left eye, the overwhelming guilt inscribed across her features in letters so impossibly large, a blind man could have read them from across the massive room. She began speaking nervously about sisterhood and unwavering support and being there for Priya through thick and thin, regardless of circumstances. And Nova desperately wanted to laugh at the cosmic absurdity of the situation. This woman was seriously discussing loyalty and sisterhood while having literally just destroyed both concepts in the most intimate way imaginable, having violated every fundamental rule of decency and basic respect. Then Desmond moved with clear purpose toward the corner where the photographer had carefully set up expensive equipment for the reception slideshow of the happy couple's romantic journey together. His fingers flew across the laptop keyboard with the practiced confidence suggesting he'd been meticulously planning this exact moment since Nova's whispered revelation 15 minutes ago. Someone who'd spent that brief time preparing something absolutely special. The giant screens, positioned strategically around the enormous ballroom, flickered once, twice, 3 times. The romantic wedding slideshow everyone was expecting. The carefully curated images of Desmond and Priya's beautiful love story disappeared completely into digital nothing, new footage, materialized like a nightmare, made horrifyingly real and unavoidable. Security camera footage from the estate's hallways appeared in high-definition clarity, timestamp visible in the corner like damning evidence at a criminal trial, showing Michael and Wilma sneaking down the guest wing corridor with absolutely zero subtlety whatsoever. Their desperate hands were absolutely everywhere, exploring each other's bodies with clear intent. Their mouths connected frantically in ways that communicated pure lust. Their bodies pressed together in ways that explicitly communicated exactly what they intended doing once they found adequate privacy. The crystal-clear footage showed Wilma aggressively pushing Michael against the hallway wall with surprising force, showed him grabbing her waist possessively, showed both of them stumbling toward that 4th room like drunks, except they clearly weren't drunk on alcohol but on betrayal and stupidity. The ballroom erupted, Exactly like a bomb had suddenly detonated in the precise center of the room, 300 impeccably. Dressed guests gasped in perfect horrified unison. The sound like a massive wave, violently crashing against rocky shores. Someone's expensive wineglass slipped from shocked fingers and shattered loudly against marble, the sound sharp and final. Someone else released a short burst of genuine shock. The elderly women covered their mouths with jeweled hands, their faces reflecting pure scandal and disapproval. The men swore creatively under their breath, some laughing nervously from discomfort, some looking genuinely angry on Nova's behalf. Every single person stared transfixed at those massive screens, displaying betrayal in stunning high-definition clarity. In colors so vivid, they almost looked fake, except everyone present knew they were devastatingly real. Wilma's face transformed from flushed red to deathly pale in mere seconds, all the blood draining away like someone had opened an invisible valve. The microphone fell from her nerveless grasp, hitting the wooden stage with feedback that screeched painfully through the speakers like an animal experiencing genuine pain. The sound making people wince and cover their ears protectively. Michael looked potentially ready to violently vomit or pass out completely, possibly both simultaneously, his face cycling through multiple shades of red and white and green that would have been genuinely funny if the situation wasn't so utterly devastating. Nova stood up with the natural grace of a woman who'd never experienced a single moment of self-doubt, who routinely commanded rooms simply by existing in them with confidence. Every eye in that ballroom turned to her instantly, 300 people waiting breathlessly to see how the betrayed wife would react, expecting tears or hysteria or dramatic collapse, because that's what always happened in movies. She walked confidently to the front with her head held impossibly high, her shoulders thrown back proudly, her measured stride containing all the accumulated authority that had built empires and systematically crushed competitors who underestimated her. She bent gracefully and retrieved the microphone that Wilma had dropped like discarded trash, held it with the casual confidence belonging exclusively to someone who'd addressed shareholders and senators and world leaders without experiencing even a moment's nervousness. "Ladies and gentlemen," Nova said, her voice impressively clear and strong and absolutely calm, projecting effortlessly to the back of the massive ballroom, "I sincerely apologize for this unexpected interruption to my brother's beautiful wedding celebration. It appears my husband and my new sister-in-law desperately needed more private accommodations for their own festivities. How inconsiderate of us to hold a wedding that interfered with their plans. Michael, Wilma, I genuinely hope the last hour justified everything you're both about to lose. I hope it was absolutely spectacular. I hope it was worth your reputations, your relationships, your dignity. I hope you remember it fondly." She handed the microphone to Desmond with steady hands, kissed his cheek with genuine affection that showed everyone watching exactly where her loyalty lay, and walked toward the exit with her parents scrambling desperately to follow. Her mother gathering her skirts, her father's face dark with protective fury. Behind her, Desmond's voice filled the ballroom with ice and controlled fury that somehow felt considerably more threatening than screaming would have been. "Wilma, as of this precise moment, you are absolutely no longer my sister. Pack your belongings from Priya's and my home tonight and never contact us again for any reason. You're dead to this family. Michael, you were my best friend for 15 years. That friendship ended permanently the moment you decided my family's trust meant less than your wandering hands and your pathetic impulses. Both of you are going to learn very expensive lessons about loyalty and consequences. This is just the beginning." Nova reached the parking lot as chaos erupted behind her like a dam finally breaking, releasing years of stored pressure in one catastrophic moment. She could clearly hear shouting, accusations flying, the kind of drama that would fuel gossip in their social circles for years, that would become absolute legend. Her mother reached her first, wrapping arms protectively around Nova's shoulders, but Nova wasn't crying at all. She was laughing, deep, genuine, slightly hysterical laughter emerging from somewhere primal and honest, releasing pressure before she completely exploded from the strain. Did you see his face when those screens lit up? Nova gasped between fits of laughter that bent her double at the waist. Did you see how white he went? I've literally seen ghosts with more color. Her father joined them quickly, his expression dark with protective fury that made him look genuinely dangerous, despite his expensive suit. Baby girl, what do you need? What can we do? Name it and it's done. I need a lawyer, Nova said, her laughter fading into something sharper, colder, infinitely more calculated and dangerous. I need the absolute best divorce attorney in the state, maybe the country. I need my bank to freeze every joint account we have. I need the locks changed on the penthouse before morning. I need all his belongings packed and shipped to his mother's house by sunrise. I need war, Daddy, total war. Her mother cupped Nova's face in both hands with the gentleness that had soothed childhood nightmares. Consider it done, baby. We'll make calls tonight. By tomorrow morning, he won't know what hit him. The moment that would become treasured family legend happened when Nova turned back toward the estate. Patricia Young, Michael's mother, was chasing him frantically through the parking lot like a mad woman possessed. Patricia, who'd spent 4 long years treating Nova with subtle disdain and barely concealed racism, who'd made countless comments about Nova's hair being too natural, her success too aggressive and unfeminine, her refusal to be appropriately deferential and submissive like a proper wife should be. Patricia caught Michael near the valet stand and slapped him across the face so hard the sound echoed off the building like a gunshot. So hard Michael's head snapped violently sideways and he stumbled. You humiliated yourself. You humiliated me. You humiliated our entire family. You threw away the best thing that ever happened to you for absolute trash, for garbage, for a woman who isn't remotely fit to speak Nova's name. You're pathetic. You're worthless. You're a disgrace. Nova's sides hurt from laughing so hard, tears streaming down her face. Her mother tried, desperately maintaining composure, but failed completely, her own laughter bubbling up despite the serious situation. That woman spent 4 years making passive-aggressive comments about you not being refined enough for her precious son, her mother managed between giggles. She questioned whether you were cultured enough, educated enough, appropriate enough. Now she's beating him in a parking lot because he wasn't good enough for you. There's beautiful poetry in that. Nova's father pulled out his phone with grim determination. I'm calling Harrison Pierce. He handled our estate planning. Best lawyer in the state, maybe the country. He'll destroy Michael in court. No, Nova said firmly, her laughter dying completely, her voice dropping to something cold and deadly serious. I don't want Michael destroyed just in court. I want him destroyed everywhere. I want his career ruined beyond repair. I want his reputation shredded so badly he can't get a job anywhere. I want everyone who ever knew him to understand exactly what kind of man chooses betrayal over loyalty. I want him to wake up 6 months from now and realize he destroyed his entire life for 1 hour. Her parents exchanged meaningful glances, then looked back at their daughter, standing in designer heels and an evening gown. And Nova saw understanding dawn in their eyes. This wasn't grief speaking. This was strategy. This was the woman who'd built an empire engaging calculated warfare. Michael had made the worst mistake of his life, and he was about to understand exactly what that meant. Chapter 3. The Empire Strikes. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of brutal, crystalline clarity that only comes after experiencing complete devastation. When the world somehow looks sharper because you've been crying or because you've finally seen truth without the comfortable filter of wishful thinking obscuring reality. Nova woke up disoriented in her childhood bedroom at her parents' sprawling house. Her mother, having absolutely insisted she avoid spending the night alone in the penthouse she'd shared with Michael for 4 years. The room looked exactly frozen in time as she'd left it when moving out after college graduation. Posters from her rebellious teenage phase still hanging on pale blue walls. Trophies from academic competitions, gathering dust on white shelves. Photographs of a younger Nova who naively believed in fairy tales and happy endings covering the dresser. That Nova felt like a complete stranger now, someone from another lifetime entirely. Her phone displayed exactly 73 missed calls from Michael by the time she finally checked it with trembling fingers. She deleted them all without listening to a single desperate voicemail, without giving him the satisfaction of knowing whether his pathetic pleas had even reached her ears. Whatever he had to say no longer mattered one bit. Words were just meaningless noise now, empty sounds from someone who'd proven himself fundamentally unworthy of being heard or believed ever again. She showered in her old bathroom under water almost too hot to tolerate, dressed methodically in black slacks and a crisp white blouse that made her look professional and completely untouchable, and called an emergency meeting of her personal team before most people had finished their morning coffee. By the time she descended the curved staircase to the private dining room her parents rarely used, except for special occasions, 5 people were already waiting with the kind of grim determination that suggested they'd been preparing for war while she slept. Harrison Pierce looked exactly like what he was: expensive, ruthless, and undefeated in court for 23 consecutive years. He'd brought a briefcase containing documents that would fundamentally change Michael's life forever, transform him from married man to divorced disaster. Rochelle Washington, Nova's executive assistant, had worked for her since the very beginning, when Bennett Global was just an idea and a dream scribbled on napkins. She knew every secret, handled every crisis with efficiency, and had already prepared 3 color-coded binders of information Nova would need for the battle ahead. Darius Cole, her head of security, was a former military man who ran comprehensive background checks on everyone who entered Nova's orbit. He'd looked troubled in ways that suggested he'd found damning information that would change everything. Imani Jefferson, her corporate attorney, had flown in from another state overnight after receiving Rochelle's emergency call at midnight. If Harrison handled the divorce proceedings, Imani would systematically handle everything else. Jerome Matthews, a private investigator whose specialty was finding things people desperately wanted hidden, secrets buried so deep most people assumed they were safe from discovery. "Tell me everything you found," Nova said, sitting at the table's head like she was opening a board meeting rather than discussing her destroyed marriage. "I want to know everything." Harrison spoke first, opening his briefcase with practiced efficiency. "The prenup is ironclad legally. Michael signed it after consulting with 3 separate independent attorneys. We insisted he retain at your expense. He explicitly waived rights to your premarital assets, your business interests, any inheritance from your family, and any appreciation of assets during the marriage. He leaves with exactly what he brought into the marriage." "Which was what, exactly?" Nova asked, her voice steady, despite the vindication blooming in her chest like poison flowers. "Approximately 70,000 in combined savings and retirement accounts, and a used sedan he since traded in for a luxury car you purchased for him as an anniversary gift. The prenup specifies that gifts become marital property subject to division. But given the circumstances of the divorce, we can argue he should return it or compensate you for its full value." Nova felt satisfaction bloom warm and dark in her chest. She'd been smart even when blinded by love, even when her heart had overruled her head. Some part of her had known, had protected herself, had understood that trust required verification even in marriage. Jerome slid a thick folder across the polished table with the careful precision of someone handling explosive evidence. "I started pulling records immediately after Mrs. Bennett called me at midnight. Michael's phone records show consistent contact with Wilma for 8 months minimum. Multiple calls daily, sometimes lasting hours. Text messages deleted regularly from his device, but I can retrieve them with proper legal authorization. The phone company keeps records, even when users think they've cleverly covered their tracks." 8 months. The number hit Nova like a physical blow, like someone had reached directly into her chest and squeezed her heart until it stopped beating properly. 8 months of coming home to him, of sleeping beside him in their bed, of believing his elaborate lies about working late and having drinks with colleagues and needing space to focus on difficult cases. 8 months of being played for an absolute fool while she built their life and he methodically destroyed it. Hotel records, Jerome continued, pulling out more documents with the systematic efficiency of someone building an airtight case. They met at 4 different hotels over the past 6 months, escalating in frequency over time. Always use cash for the rooms to avoid paper trails, but security footage confirms their identities at check-in without question. I've got timestamps, dates, everything you need for court proceedings. Additionally, I pulled records from restaurants, bars, places they frequented together while pretending to be strangers to anyone watching. Rochelle opened her first meticulously organized binder with tabs color-coded by category. Michael's been using your credit cards for purchases directly related to the affair. Jewelry sent to Wilma's address with gift messages. Flowers delivered to her during times you were traveling for business. Expensive dinners charged during evenings. He claimed to be working late on urgent cases. I've documented every single transaction, cross-referenced with his calendar and yours. Total estimated spending on the affair is approximately $42,000. He used your money to betray you. The fury that rose in Nova's throat tasted like battery acid mixed with poison, like something that could corrode steel. He'd used her money, her success, her generosity to finance his betrayal. Every gift she'd watched him purchase and assumed was for clients or colleagues had actually been for his mistress. Every expense she'd trusted him to handle responsibly had been another nail in their marriage's coffin. Imani spoke next, her voice clinical and precise like a surgeon describing exactly where to cut. Michael is a junior partner at Whitmore and Associates, one of the most prestigious law firms in the state. Their ethics policy explicitly forbids conduct that brings disrepute to the firm or violates moral turpitude clauses in partnership agreements. An extramarital affair, particularly one involving fraud and systematic misuse of spousal funds, qualifies without question. I prepared a formal complaint detailing his violations, backed by irrefutable evidence. The firm will have no choice but to terminate him or face potential liability themselves. File it immediately, Nova said without hesitation, without mercy, without a single second of doubt. I want it submitted before close of business tomorrow. Darius cleared his throat, his military bearing making the gesture seem almost violent. I ran a deeper background check on Michael than we did before your marriage, going back further, digging deeper into his history. Found some interesting things that suggest a concerning pattern. Job applications from before he met you where he listed desired salary ranges 3 times what he actually made. Social media posts he deleted where he talked about finding someone successful to settle down with for financial security. Search history from public computers at the library showing he researched wealthy women in the city. Successful businesswomen specifically looking for potential targets. Nova's blood went cold, her skin prickling with something between rage and vindication. You're saying he targeted me specifically and deliberately? I'm saying he knew exactly who you were and what you were worth before your first date, Darius said carefully, choosing his words with military precision. Whether that constitutes targeting or opportunism is open to interpretation. But he wasn't surprised by your success or your wealth. He sought it out deliberately. He researched you before he ever spoke to you. The chance meeting at the charity gala wasn't chance at all. The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity, like a puzzle Nova had been trying to solve, suddenly revealing its ugly picture. The chance meeting that had felt so organic, so natural, so meant to be. His immediate interest, despite Nova being surrounded by more conventionally attractive women who fit traditional beauty standards better. His quick progression from charming stranger to committed boyfriend. His willingness to sign the prenup without much fight, because he thought 4 years was enough time to convince her to give him access to everything, to wear down her defenses, to make her feel guilty enough to hand over what he wanted. She'd been a mark from the very beginning, a target, a woman to use and discard once he'd extracted maximum value. Harrison pulled out another document, this one thick with legal language and official seals. Divorce papers. I'll file them first thing tomorrow morning at the courthouse. Should be served to him by end of business. Given the evidence, the affair, the financial misconduct, this should be quick and absolutely brutal. He has no grounds to contest anything. But then came the complication that would fundamentally test everything Nova thought she knew about winning. There's something else, Harrison said, his expression troubled in ways that made Nova's stomach clench. Michael's attorney just filed a countersuit this morning. He's claiming you signed the prenup under duress, that you threatened to cancel the wedding unless he signed immediately, that he had inadequate time to review the document properly. He's requesting the prenup be voided entirely. Nova felt ice flood her veins, cold spreading through her body. Can he prove that claim? He's got 3 character witnesses willing to testify that you're controlling and manipulative in relationships. His mother, a colleague from his firm, and a friend from college. It's thin evidence, but if a sympathetic judge believes him, this could get extremely complicated. Prenups can be challenged successfully if there's evidence of coercion. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, Nova felt genuine fear crawling up her spine. If that prenup fell apart completely, Michael could actually take a substantial portion of everything she'd built through blood and sweat. "What are our options?" she asked quietly, forcing her voice to remain steady. "We fight hard and systematically," Harrison said. "We document everything. We prove he had adequate representation. But Nova, I need you to prepare mentally for the possibility that this gets messy and prolonged. Michael's playing dirty, and he's hired someone who knows what they're doing." Nova looked around the table at her team, seeing concern mirrored in all their faces. She'd thought this would be simple, clean, decisive. Instead, she was facing a real battle with genuinely uncertain outcomes. "Then we prepare for war," she said finally. "Real war. If Michael wants to fight dirty, we'll show him what dirty actually looks like when you're fighting someone with real resources." But as her team dispersed to execute their various strategies, Nova sat alone in that dining room, feeling something she hadn't allowed herself since the wedding, genuine doubt about whether she'd actually win this fight at all. Chapter 4. The Unraveling. The divorce papers hit Michael like a freight train carrying his entire destroyed future on Monday morning at precisely 9:45. Nova knew the exact moment because Harrison sent her a photo captured by the process server. Michael's face, when he received the thick envelope of documents in the lobby of Whitmore and Associates while surrounded by colleagues and clients witnessing his humiliation. The man looked like he'd been struck by lightning, like the ground had opened beneath his feet to swallow him whole, like his entire world had ended in the span of a single heartbeat. Nova was sitting in her corner office 50 floors above the city when she received the photo, surrounded by glass and steel and the kind of view that reminded her exactly who she was and what she commanded. The skyline stretched before her like a kingdom she'd built brick by brick, deal by deal. Queens didn't mourn in darkness and isolation. They rebuilt in light, where everyone could watch their resurrection. Her phone buzzed insistently with Michael's number, attempting to reach her for what must have been the 100th time. She sent it straight to voicemail without a second thought, without a moment of hesitation or guilt. His voice no longer deserved access to her ears, her time, her energy. 3 minutes later, her secretary buzzed through the intercom system with barely concealed alarm. "Chapter C, Miss Bennett. There's a Michael Young in the lobby making quite a scene, demanding to see you immediately. Security is prepared to remove him by force if you give the authorization." Tell security to escort him out immediately with maximum efficiency, Nova said calmly, her voice never wavering from its professional tone, maintaining the composure that had made her legendary. If he returns for any reason, call the police and have him arrested for trespassing. Make it absolutely clear that he is permanently banned from this building and all Bennett Global properties. She returned to reviewing contracts for an expansion deal that would take her company into 2 new international markets. Her pen moving across pages with confident strokes, while Michael's life imploded systematically floors below, completely beyond his control. By Tuesday afternoon, Michael's law firm received the detailed ethics complaint Imani had prepared with devastating precision and thorough documentation. It outlined every single violation, backed by evidence that couldn't be disputed or explained away or swept under prestigious corporate rugs. Michael had billed personal time as business expenses, claiming to work on client matters while actually planning affair logistics. He'd used client meeting hours for clandestine rendezvous with Wilma. He'd violated the firm's morality clause so thoroughly and completely it was almost impressive in its audacity and stupidity. The senior partners called an emergency meeting that very evening behind closed doors. By Wednesday morning, Michael Young was officially unemployed. His partnership terminated with immediate effect. His name removed from the website and all marketing materials. His office packed up and waiting in the lobby like trash. Rochelle brought Nova coffee and the news with a smile that could cut glass that radiated pure satisfaction. Whitmore and Associates released a public statement an hour ago. Michael Young is no longer affiliated with their firm, effective immediately. No severance package. No recommendations. No graceful exit strategy. They're distancing themselves so fast and so far they might achieve escape velocity and leave the planet entirely. Nova sipped her coffee, expensive blend imported from Ethiopia, and felt absolutely nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just the cold certainty that consequences had arrived exactly as promised, that actions had repercussions. That betrayal carried a price tag Michael was only beginning to understand, but then Tuesday afternoon brought news that fundamentally changed everything Nova thought she knew about this fight. Headlines started appearing across business news sites and social media platforms. Billionaire CEO accused of coercing husband into unfair prenup. Michael's attorney was giving carefully orchestrated interviews, painting him as a victim of emotional manipulation and financial coercion. A man who'd been systematically controlled by a powerful woman. Nova sat in her corner office, watching her carefully constructed narrative spiral completely out of her control. Her phone buzzed constantly with board members expressing concerns, investors asking pointed questions, partners requesting urgent clarification about the allegations. Rochelle entered looking genuinely worried for the first time since Nova had known her. "Miss Bennett, we have a serious problem developing. 3 major clients are considering pulling contracts pending the outcome of this lawsuit. They're concerned about being associated with someone publicly accused of coercion and manipulation." Nova felt something cold and uncomfortable settle in her stomach. How much are we talking about in total?" "Approximately 15 million in contracts over the next fiscal year. Potentially more if others follow their lead and this becomes a trend." For the first time since the wedding, Nova felt genuine panic clawing at her throat. Michael's lies were actually working effectively. People were believing his carefully crafted victim narrative, accepting his version of events without question. By Wednesday afternoon, Michael's law firm issued a surprising statement supporting him, claiming they'd reviewed the situation thoroughly and found no ethical violations whatsoever. Apparently, Michael had convinced them he was the wronged party, deserving sympathy rather than condemnation. "How is this happening?" Nova asked Harrison during an emergency conference call, her voice tight with frustration. "How is he winning?" "He's not winning," Harrison said carefully, choosing his words with precision. "He's making noise and creating doubt. But Nova, I need to be completely honest with you about something difficult. His case has some legitimate merit. The timeline for signing the prenup was compressed. You did give him an ultimatum about signing before the wedding or postponing the ceremony. A sympathetic judge might find that constitutes inappropriate pressure. So what are you saying exactly? I'm saying prepare mentally for a settlement negotiation. Maybe not half of marital assets, but something substantial. 20% of marital assets. Maybe 30% depending on the judge. Nova felt her world tilting dangerously off its axis. 20% of what she'd built during their marriage was still millions. Millions that Michael would take despite his betrayal, his lies, his complete destruction of their marriage. There has to be another way, she said desperately, hearing the desperation in her own voice. There is, Harrison said quietly, but you're not going to like it at all. That evening, Desmond found Nova in her penthouse, staring blankly at the city lights spread below her like scattered diamonds, a half-empty wine bottle on the glass table beside her expensive couch. I'm losing, she said without preamble, without bothering with pleasantries. Michael's actually winning. His victim story is working on people. Desmond sat beside her, his presence solid and comforting. You're not losing. You're facing your first real setback. There's a significant difference. It doesn't feel different right now. That's because you've never failed at anything before, Desmond said bluntly, with the honesty only siblings can deliver. You've never had a plan that didn't work perfectly, but now you're learning what the rest of us already know. Sometimes you have to adapt. Sometimes the first strategy fails and you need a second one. Sometimes winning means changing tactics. Nova turned to look at her brother with exhausted eyes. What if I can't win this? Then you learn to accept a draw and move forward anyway, Desmond said. But I don't think you're ready to accept that yet. I think you've got more fight in you. You just need to find it again. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source at exactly midnight. Jerome called with information that changed everything fundamentally. I found something important, he said, his voice tight with excitement. Michael met with his attorney 6 weeks before the wedding. 6 weeks, Nova. He was actively planning his legal strategy for the divorce before he even married you. Nova sat up straight, wine forgotten. Can you prove it conclusively? I've got security footage of him entering the attorney's office building. I've got billing records showing he paid for consultation about prenuptial agreements. And if we subpoena phone records, I can prove they discussed prenup challenges before the wedding even happened. Which means he didn't sign under duress, Nova said, clarity flooding through her exhausted mind. He signed knowing exactly what he was doing, planning his exit strategy from the very beginning. Exactly. His whole victim narrative collapses completely. But Nova, getting this admitted in court might be tricky. We need to prove it's relevant to the case. It's relevant because it proves premeditation, Nova said, her strategic mind racing. It proves he entered the marriage planning to divorce me and contest the prenup. It proves everything. By Thursday morning, Harrison had filed new motions with Jerome's evidence attached. By Friday afternoon, Michael's countersuit was collapsing systematically, but the damage was done to Nova's reputation. She'd learned a crucial lesson. Victory wasn't guaranteed just because you were right. Plans failed even when carefully constructed, and sometimes you had to fight considerably harder than you ever imagined just to hold on to what was already rightfully yours. She sat in her office Friday evening, exhausted but wiser, when Rochelle brought her fresh coffee. You okay, Miss Bennett? I'm okay, Nova said slowly, processing everything. I'm learning. I thought destroying Michael would be easy. Turns out he's smarter than I gave him credit for. Not smart enough, but smarter than expected. You won, though, Rochelle pointed out. This round, Nova said. But there'll be more fights. And now I know I'm not invincible. That's actually valuable information to have. She'd faced her first real setback and survived it. That mattered more than the perfect victory she'd been naively expecting. Chapter 5. The sister-in-law's fall. Wilma's desperate attempt at redemption came in the form of a tearful video posted to her remaining social media followers. Dim, artistic lighting framing her running makeup, her voice breaking with practiced precision every few words, as she explained how she'd fallen in love and made terrible choices but hoped people would understand that hearts were complicated things that didn't follow rules or logic or common sense. The video went viral instantly, but not remotely in the way she'd intended or hoped for her redemption. The comments were absolutely brutal. Thousands of people piling on with the kind of creative cruelty that only the internet could deliver effectively, dissecting every word, mocking every excuse, tearing apart the narrative she'd tried to construct around herself as some kind of tragic romantic figure. You didn't fall in love. You fell for a married man and betrayed your sister-in-law at your brother's wedding. That's not romance. That's pure garbage behavior. Imagine crying about consequences like you didn't know exactly what you were doing every step of the way. The audacity of calling this love when you destroyed someone else's marriage is truly something special and horrifying. Nova watched the pathetic video in her office with Rochelle standing beside her, both of them silent until the end, until Wilma's final plea for understanding faded to black. She actually thought people would sympathize with her, Rochelle said, shaking her head in genuine disbelief. She thought playing the victim card would work, that people would see her as some tragic romantic figure instead of what she actually is. What Wilma hadn't anticipated was Priya deciding she'd had enough. Desmond's wife, usually quiet and gentle and soft-spoken, decided she was done watching her new sister-in-law get dragged while her actual sister got away with portraying herself as some kind of tragic heroine in a love story rather than the villain in someone else's nightmare. Priya's response video was 5 minutes of calm, devastating truth delivered with the precision of a surgeon making necessary cuts. She sat in perfect lighting, her expression serene and controlled, her voice steady and clear, and methodically destroyed every single lie Wilma had constructed. Wilma borrowed $15,000 from Desmond and me 6 months ago, claiming she desperately needed it for business investments that would change her life forever. She spent every penny on designer clothes and a trip to Miami with Michael while we waited for repayment that never came. Wilma told me she loved me like a sister while actively sleeping with Nova's husband, actively destroying a marriage while preaching about family values on her platform. Wilma posted constantly about female empowerment and sisterhood while committing the ultimate betrayal against another woman. This isn't love, no matter how she frames it. This is calculated betrayal by someone who wanted what someone else built, who thought she could steal someone's life and wear it like a costume. You didn't love Michael, Wilma. You loved the idea of having what Nova created. You loved the fantasy of stealing someone's success and status. But here's the fundamental truth you never understood. You can steal crowns, but you need a queen's head to wear one properly. And you were never royal. You were always just a thief wearing stolen jewels. The video exploded across the internet like a bomb detonating in a crowded space. 20 million views in 3 days. News outlets picked it up and ran segments. Commentary channels dissected it frame by frame. Wilma became the universal villain in a story she'd tried desperately to rewrite, the cautionary tale about betrayal and consequences. Nova sent Priya an enormous flower arrangement with orchids and roses that must have cost thousands, along with a card that read, "Welcome to the family. You're the sister I actually wanted and deserved all along." Priya sent back a text with heart emojis and a note saying, "Desmond says Michael and Wilma both catastrophically underestimated the Bennett family. They won't make that mistake again because they'll never get another chance." But the real implosion, the spectacular collapse that made everything else look small, came when Jerome appeared in Nova's office on a Friday afternoon with a folder and an expression that suggested Christmas had arrived early and brought exactly the gifts he'd hoped for. "You're going to absolutely love this," he said, spreading documents across her mahogany desk like spreading cards in a winning hand. "This is the jackpot we've been looking for." Text messages, hundreds of them, between Michael and Wilma, discussing their future together in explicit detail. planning their exit strategy from their respective situations, like they were planning a vacation rather than destroying multiple lives. Michael had been systematically lying to Wilma about the prenup, spinning elaborate fiction that would make novelists jealous. He told her Nova had no legal protection whatsoever, that he'd get half of everything in a divorce because that's how marriage worked in their state, that they'd be set for life once he extracted his settlement from his wealthy, successful wife. He'd painted vivid pictures of European vacations and suburban houses and private schools for the baby Wilma claimed was his. Wilma's messages showed she'd believed him completely, absolutely without question or skepticism. She'd been planning how to spend money that would never exist, making detailed lists of purchases, researching exclusive neighborhoods, picking out furniture for houses they'd never own. She'd built entire fantasies on Michael's elaborate lies. Then came the messages, after Wilma learned the truth, after someone showed her the actual prenup, after she realized Michael had lied about literally everything, after she understood there was no money, no settlement, no luxurious future waiting at the end of this disaster. The breakup text had somehow leaked online, and Jerome swore under oath he had nothing to do with it. But his satisfied smile suggested he knew exactly how it had found its way to social media platforms. "You're a broke loser who couldn't even cheat properly. You ruined my reputation, destroyed my career, and obliterated my life for nothing. No money, no future, no anything. We're done forever. Don't ever contact me again for any reason. The baby isn't even yours, you pathetic piece of absolute trash. I hope Nova destroys you completely." Nova read it 5 times, each time funnier than the last, each word more satisfying than expensive wine. She excused herself to her private bathroom and laughed until tears ran down her face and her stomach muscles hurt and she couldn't breathe properly. The kind of laughter that released years of accumulated tension. When she emerged, carefully reapplying makeup, Rochelle was waiting with her tablet cued to social media. It's already trending across multiple platforms. People are roasting Michael so thoroughly the internet might actually catch fire from the heat. The comments were comedy platinum, pure gold that couldn't be manufactured. Man really fumbled a billionaire CEO for an influencer who dumped him via text the second she realized he was broke. That's not a downgrade. That's a complete system failure on every level. He thought he was playing chess, but didn't realize Nova owned the entire board, the pieces, and the building where the game was happening. Imagine destroying your marriage, your career, and your reputation for someone who leaves you via text message. Absolutely legendary levels of stupidity that should be studied by scientists. Nova screenshot her absolute favorites and sent them to Desmond, who responded with crying, laughing emojis and a voice message. "Sis, karma isn't just real. She's creative. She's artistic. She's a whole damn performance artist working overtime." The powerful moment came when a mutual acquaintance reached out through carefully neutral channels, saying Wilma wanted to apologize in person, actually apologize face to face. Hoping for some kind of forgiveness or closure or reconciliation. Nova's response was delivered through her assistant, professional and absolutely final in tone. "Tell Miss Haynes that I don't accept apologies from people who are only sorry they got caught, not sorry for what they actually did. Tell her she's permanently blocked from every event, every circle, every space I occupy or influence in any capacity. She wanted my life so desperately she tried to steal it. Now she can spend the rest of hers learning the difference between wanting something and deserving it." The acquaintance tried to push back, to suggest Nova was being unnecessarily harsh, that forgiveness was healing and healthy, that holding on to anger was poisonous to the soul. Nova's second response was even clearer, even more final. "I'm healed by removing toxic people from my life permanently, not by giving them continued access to hurt me again." Wilma made her choices with full knowledge of the consequences. "I'm making mine. The conversation is over. Don't contact me about this again." Saturday morning brought news that made Nova actually pause her coffee mid-sip. Michael had attempted to file yet another countersuit. actually had the audacity to claim emotional distress caused by Nova's actions, requesting spousal support to maintain his lifestyle during the separation period. Harrison called Nova personally to tell her about it, his voice containing barely suppressed laughter that broke through his usual professional demeanor. "He's claiming you caused him psychological harm by publicly humiliating him at the wedding reception," Harrison said, not even trying to contain his amusement anymore. His lawyer actually filed this with a straight face. "I'm almost impressed by the sheer audacity required. What are our options?" Nova asked, already knowing the answer, but wanting to hear it spoken aloud. "We destroy him in court. Again. With pleasure and precision and thoroughness. This countersuit is going to cost him money he doesn't have and make him look even worse than he already does, which I didn't think was possible at this point." Sunday evening found Nova sitting in her penthouse, every single trace of Michael erased from existence, every surface reclaimed, every room redecorated with furniture and art that reflected her taste rather than compromise. She poured herself expensive wine from her collection and opened her laptop to a news article someone had sent about second chances and public forgiveness and the importance of grace in modern society. She closed it immediately without reading past the headline, without giving it a moment's consideration. Some people deserve second chances, deserved opportunities for redemption and growth. Michael and Wilma had used their first chances to betray, to lie, to destroy trust so completely it could never be rebuilt, no matter how much regret they eventually felt. They could spend their second chances learning to live with the consequences of their choices, learning that actions have prices that must be paid, learning that some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt, no matter how much you regret setting them on fire in the first place. Nova Bennett was done being anyone's lesson in forgiveness or grace. She'd learned her own lessons about protecting herself, about valuing herself properly, about refusing to accept less than she deserved from anyone. And that lesson didn't include forgiving people who'd proven themselves fundamentally unworthy of her grace, her time, or her energy. Chapter 6. The Unexpected Encounter. Nova's mother had been meticulously planning the intervention for weeks, gathering evidence of Nova's workaholic spiral like a prosecutor building a case, documenting the 18-hour workdays and midnight emails, and complete absence of anything resembling self-care or rest. She appeared at the penthouse on a Tuesday evening with designer luggage, maternal determination strong enough to move mountains, and guilt powerful enough to convince anyone of anything. "Baby, you've been working yourself into the ground systematically," her mother said, setting expensive bags down in the marble foyer with finality that suggested she planned to physically pack Nova herself if necessary. "You need rest. You need perspective. You need space to remember who you are beyond all this pain and anger and justified rage that's consuming you. Mama, I have 3 major deals closing this month that require my direct supervision and strategic guidance, which your very capable team can handle brilliantly," and her mother interrupted with the kind of unquestionable authority that had raised 2 successful children and terrified their childhood friends. "You hired brilliant people specifically so you could delegate important responsibilities. You're going on vacation, whether you like it or not. Somewhere beautiful, somewhere far from this city and these memories, somewhere you can breathe actual air instead of recirculated office atmosphere and stress." Nova tried arguing, marshalling logical reasons why leaving now was impossible given the critical nature of ongoing negotiations. But her mother deployed the ultimate weapon, the nuclear option that no child could withstand, regardless of age. She looked at Nova with eyes full of love and deep concern, eyes that had watched her daughter build empires while neglecting herself, and said simply, "Please, for me, you've been so strong for everyone else. Now be strong enough to rest. You've fought every battle. Now win the war by surviving it and taking care of yourself." 2 days later, Nova landed in Bali with minimal luggage, maximum reluctance, and absolutely no plan beyond appeasing her mother and avoiding another guilt-inducing phone call. She'd rented a private villa overlooking the ocean, perched dramatically on cliffs that dropped to turquoise water, far enough from tourist crowds to guarantee complete solitude and privacy. The first 3 days were spent sleeping 14 hours at a stretch, swimming in her private infinity pool, and pointedly ignoring the constant stream of business emails that piled up in her inbox like accusations of abandonment. On the 4th day, her mother called to check in, to verify Nova was actually resting rather than working remotely. "Have you left the villa at all?" "I went swimming yesterday afternoon," Nova protested weakly, knowing what was coming. "In your private pool, which doesn't count as actually experiencing Bali. Go explore the actual island. Visit a local market. Talk to human beings who aren't employees or lawyers or business associates. Remember how to be a person instead of a walking corporation that happens to sleep occasionally." Nova went to the local market mostly to appease her mother and avoid another guilt-inducing phone call filled with disappointed silence. She wore a simple sundress, minimal makeup that felt strange after years of professional polish. Her hair in natural curls she rarely wore in professional settings because they felt too vulnerable, too authentic, too much like the real her rather than the CEO persona she'd perfected. Then someone crashed into her with the force of a small vehicle moving at considerable speed. Actually crashed. Full-body collision that sent packages flying through the air like confetti at a celebration. Exotic fruit rolling across ancient cobblestones like escaped prisoners seeking freedom. Nova stumbling backward, with arms windmilling desperately as she tried maintaining balance against physics and momentum and complete surprise. She failed spectacularly and dramatically, landing hard on her backside in market dirt, with mangoes rolling around her like confused orange spheres, and fabric samples floating through the air like butterflies who'd forgotten how flying worked. "Oh, bloody hell! I'm so incredibly sorry. I didn't see you standing there. I wasn't watching where I was going at all. I'm usually much more coordinated than this disaster suggests." A man appeared above her, horror written across genuinely handsome features, trying desperately to help while apologizing profusely in a gorgeous accent that sounded British but with undertones of something else, something melodic and warm. His hands reached for her arms to pull her upright, but he stepped directly on her sundress hem with his sandal, causing her to stumble forward into him with all the grace of a newborn giraffe learning to walk. They both went down in a tangle of limbs and tropical fruit and absolute mortification, landing in dirt that would definitely stain expensive fabric. Nova started laughing, actually laughing from somewhere deep in her belly, the kind that felt rusty from disuse, the kind that came without permission or dignity or concern for appearances. This absolute disaster of a man lay sprawled beside her in market dirt, covered in mango juice that was definitely going to be impossible to wash out completely, looking utterly horrified at his own existence and catastrophic clumsiness. "I designed a building that won international awards for sustainable architecture," he said, staring at the bright blue sky like it might offer answers, or at least sympathy. "I can calculate structural loads in my head while standing on one foot. But apparently, I can't walk through a simple market without assaulting innocent tourists and destroying their shopping experience. I run a billion-dollar company without breaking a sweat most days," Nova countered, still laughing so hard her sides hurt. "But apparently, I can't handle basic fruit shopping without ending up on the ground covered in produce, like some kind of comedy sketch." He sat up carefully, testing for injuries, then offered his hand properly, this time with exaggerated care. "Julian Okafor, professional architect and part-time catastrophe, who should probably be banned from public spaces for everyone's safety. Nova Bennett, professional executive and clearly terrible at vacation, since this is my first venture outside my villa in 4 days." They helped each other up with exaggerated care, gathering scattered purchases while trying not to step on more fruit, and somehow ended up at a nearby cafe, drinking strong coffee and talking like they'd known each other for years instead of minutes. Julian was Nigerian-British, he explained, had moved to Bali 2 years ago to design sustainable resorts that worked with environments instead of against them, that honored local traditions while embracing modern technology and innovation. He was passionate about architecture in ways that made his entire face light up when he discussed buildings that breathed and structures that told stories about their locations. He had absolutely no idea who Nova was beyond what she told him. Didn't follow business news or financial markets. Didn't care about corporate empires or hostile takeovers or who was worth what, according to Forbes. Didn't even own a television because he claimed screens interfered with actual living and experiencing the world. He just liked that she argued with him about design principles despite knowing absolutely nothing about architecture, that she laughed at his jokes that weren't actually funny, that she challenged his ideas with questions that made him think differently about problems he'd considered solved. Coffee transformed into lunch at a small restaurant overlooking the ocean. Lunch morphed into dinner at a different place Julian insisted served the absolute best seafood in all of Bali. Dinner became spending the next day exploring ancient temples together, Julian explaining architectural features while Nova pretended to understand and occasionally asked questions that revealed her complete ignorance about load-bearing structures. Julian made Nova laugh. Real laughter, the kind she hadn't experienced in months, possibly years. He teased her about being terrible at haggling in markets, claiming she paid triple what things were actually worth. She mocked his complete inability to eat even mildly spicy food without looking potentially ready for medical intervention. They argued about everything from politics to art, to whether pineapple belonged on pizza, heated debates that felt important in the moment but meant nothing beyond enjoying the intellectual clash. On their third day together, they sat on a pristine beach watching sunset paint the sky in colors that seemed impossible, in shades that shouldn't exist but did anyway. Julian had brought wine and cheese, creating an impromptu picnic that felt intimate without being forced, romantic without demanding anything. "You've got a tan line where a ring used to be," he said quietly, nodding at her left hand, where pale skin stood out starkly against tanned fingers. Nova froze momentarily, then deliberately relaxed her shoulders. She'd come to Bali specifically to escape this conversation, but Julian's expression held pure curiosity without judgment, genuine interest without agenda or expectation. She told him everything without editing or softening. The wedding that was supposed to be perfect, the betrayal captured in photos she couldn't unsee, Michael and Wilma, the screens displaying infidelity to 300 witnesses, the divorce, the systematic destruction of 2 people who'd catastrophically underestimated her capacity for strategic warfare. Julian listened without interrupting once, giving her his complete attention, his expression shifting from shock to understanding to something that looked surprisingly like admiration instead of the pity she'd expected and dreaded. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, watching waves crash rhythmically against shore with hypnotic consistency. "The way I see it, you didn't lose anything valuable," he finally said, his voice thoughtful and measured. "You discovered you'd been carrying dead weight, and you had the strength to cut it loose before it drowned you completely. That's not loss, Nova, that's evolution. That's becoming the person you were always meant to be, without someone holding you back, without someone diminishing you to make themselves feel adequate." Something in Nova's chest cracked open, not breaking dramatically but opening carefully, unfurling like a flower that had been closed for protection, discovering it was finally safe. "Most people tell me I should forgive him," she said softly, vulnerability feeling strange in her mouth. "That holding anger is like drinking poison and expecting him to die from it." Most people are idiots who've never been betrayed like you have, Julian said bluntly, with refreshing honesty that felt like a gift. Anger isn't poison. Anger is information. It tells you boundaries were violated. It motivates you to protect yourself properly. It drives you to ensure you never accept less than you deserve ever again. The people telling you to forgive are usually the ones uncomfortable with justified rage from powerful women who refuse to diminish themselves for anyone's comfort. Nova turned to look at him. This man she'd known for less than a week, who somehow understood her better than people who'd known her for years, who'd never seen her as something requiring fixing or apologizing for. "You're different from anyone I've ever met," she said. "I should hope so." Julian replied with a grin that transformed his handsome face. "I'm the idiot who knocked you into dirt and covered you in mango juice within 30 seconds of meeting you." The bar for different is pretty low at this point. They stayed on that beach until stars filled the sky like diamonds scattered across velvet, talking about everything and nothing, about dreams and failures and what came next. And Nova felt something she hadn't felt since before the wedding. Hope. Chapter 7. The Return and the Revelation. Nova returned from Bali fundamentally changed in ways that couldn't be measured or quantified easily. Not healed completely, because healing wasn't linear, and pretending otherwise diminished the journey, diminished the work required to rebuild yourself after devastation. But lighter somehow. Like she'd finally put down weight she'd been carrying for so long, she'd forgotten what existing without it felt like, what breathing freely meant. She and Julian had exchanged numbers, promising to stay in touch across continents and time zones that complicated everything. No pressure applied to anything, no demands made on anyone, no expectations beyond genuine connection between two people who'd collided in a market and somehow found something worth nurturing carefully. They talked daily through video calls at odd hours because time zones complicated simple conversations, messages about nothing important that somehow felt vital to functioning properly. Julian sent her photos of his latest project, a resort built into a hillside that looked like it grew there naturally, like nature and architecture had merged into something beautiful and sustainable. Nova sent him pictures of her office view, her morning coffee ritual, the way sunset hit her penthouse windows and transformed ordinary glass into liquid gold. At Bennett Global, people noticed the change immediately and commented quietly among themselves. Nova smiled more during meetings that used to be tense exercises in corporate dominance, laughed at jokes that would have previously gotten polite acknowledgement at best, seemed more present, more engaged. More like the woman who'd built this empire instead of the warrior who'd been defending it through sheer force of will and stubborn determination. Desmond visited her office one evening unannounced, bringing Thai food and brotherly intuition that had always been eerily accurate throughout their lives. "You met someone interesting," he said, not asking, not questioning, simply stating observed fact. Setting down containers on her desk like he owned the place. Like boundaries between siblings didn't exist or matter, Nova tried denying it, tried deflecting with humor, but Desmond knew her better than anyone alive. They'd grown up together, built dreams together, survived their parents' expectations together, protected each other through everything life threw at them. "His name is Julian," and she admitted, feeling strangely vulnerable in ways she hadn't felt in years. "He's an architect in Bali. We met when he literally crashed into me at a market, and we both ended up covered in fruit like some kind of romantic comedy scene." Desmond grinned broadly, the kind of smile that meant he approved before even meeting the man. "After the trash you took out, you deserve someone who sees your value, who understands your worth without you having to prove it constantly. When do I get to meet him and decide if he's worthy of my sister?" "He's visiting next month," Nova said, surprising herself because they'd only discussed it yesterday. Julian suggesting he had business contacts in the city anyway. Nova pretending that was the only reason she'd agreed so enthusiastically. Rochelle materialized in the doorway like she'd been summoned by gossip, by the promise of interesting developments in Nova's personal life. Did someone say a man is visiting Miss Bennet? After the Michael situation, I prepared a comprehensive background check questionnaire. 3 pages, single-spaced. Covers everything from his credit score to his favorite childhood pet to his views on pineapple pizza. Desmond high-fived Rochelle enthusiastically while Nova threw a stress ball at both of them, missing intentionally, because hitting them would have required actual anger she didn't feel. "You two are absolutely ridiculous," she said, but she was laughing, and the sound felt good echoing through her office that had been too serious for too long, too focused on warfare rather than living. The powerful moment came, unexpectedly that same evening when Nova was preparing to leave for the day. Her secretary buzzed through with obvious hesitation coloring her professional voice. "Miss Bennet, there's a Patricia Young in the lobby requesting to see you urgently. I can have security remove her immediately if you prefer that option." Patricia Young, Michael's mother, the woman who'd spent 4 years making Nova feel inadequate, who'd questioned her refinement and education and whether she was appropriate for her precious son. Nova should have said no immediately, should have sent the woman away without a second thought or moment of consideration. But curiosity won this particular internal battle, the need to understand what could possibly prompt this visit after everything that had transpired. "Send her up," Nova said, ignoring Desmond's concerned expression and protective posture that suggested he was ready to physically intervene if necessary. Patricia Young looked diminished when she entered Nova's office minutes later, smaller somehow, without her usual designer armor and judgmental expression that had been her default for years. Her hands trembled visibly as she sat in the guest chair that had hosted presidents and prime ministers and CEOs who commanded billions. "Thank you for seeing me," Patricia said quietly, her voice lacking its usual confidence and superiority. "I know I don't deserve your time or consideration after everything." Nova said nothing, letting silence stretch uncomfortably until Patricia continued, until discomfort forced honesty that might not otherwise emerge. "I was wrong about you from the very beginning," Patricia said, her voice cracking like ice under pressure. "I thought you weren't good enough for my son. I made terrible comments about your hair, your success, your refusal to be deferential the way I thought wives should be with their husbands. I treated you like you should be grateful Michael chose you, like he was doing you some enormous favor by marrying you. But the truth I've been avoiding, the truth that's been destroying me with guilt, is painfully simple. Michael was never good enough for you, not even close. I raised an entitled boy who became an entitled man. When he had something precious, something extraordinary, he destroyed it because he didn't understand its value, because I taught him he deserved everything without earning anything. You were the best thing that ever happened to him, and I made his worst impulses worse with my behavior, with my prejudice, with my racism that I pretended was just preference or traditional values." Tears streamed down Patricia's face now, mascara running in dark rivers, and Nova found herself unmoved emotionally. These weren't her tears to dry, her grief to soothe, her problem to solve. "I'm so deeply sorry for every moment I made you feel less than extraordinary," Patricia continued, her voice breaking completely now. "You built everything. You were always the prize in that relationship. And I'm here to apologize, knowing it's too late. Knowing you owe me absolutely nothing, but needing you to know that I recognize my failures, that I understand what I destroyed with my narrow-minded prejudice." Nova could have gloated vindictively, could have listed every microaggression, every subtle insult, every moment Patricia had made family dinners feel like judgment sessions specifically designed to make Nova question her worth and belonging. Could have sent this woman away with words sharp enough to draw blood, painful enough to scar permanently. Instead, she felt something completely unexpected washing over her like a wave. Peace, not forgiveness exactly, but something close to understanding, to closure she hadn't known she needed. Mrs. Young, Nova said carefully, choosing words with precision, I appreciate your apology more than you probably realize. But I need you to understand something important. Your racism, your disapproval, Michael's betrayal, none of it diminished me or my worth. It revealed me to myself. It showed me I'm stronger than I knew, more resilient than I imagined, and absolutely unwilling to settle for less than I deserve ever again from anyone. Patricia nodded mutely, makeup completely destroyed now, looking older than Nova had ever seen her look before. Your apology is noted and acknowledged, Nova continued, her voice gentle but absolutely firm in its boundaries. But I don't need it for closure anymore. I gave myself closure the day I walked away from your son. I don't need your validation or approval or regret now. I needed those things 4 years ago when I was trying to build a family that included you. When I was bending myself into shapes that didn't fit, trying to earn acceptance that should have been freely given based on how I treated your son. Now I'm building a life that works without people who made me feel small, who made me question my worth, who made me fight for basic respect that should have been automatic. Patricia started to speak, to say something else, but Nova held up one hand with gentle authority. I hope you find peace, Mrs. Young. I hope you learn from this experience about prejudice and missed opportunities. I hope you treat the next woman in your son's life, if there ever is one, with the respect you denied me. But that's not my concern anymore. My concern is moving forward with people who value me from the beginning, not people who recognize my worth only after losing access to it. Patricia left in tears, her shoulders shaking, and Desmond looked at his sister with something like awe, lighting his face with pride. That was incredibly gracious, considering everything she put you through, he said. That was self-preservation, Nova corrected him gently. Holding on to anger at her would give her continued power over my peace and emotional state. She doesn't get that anymore. Nobody does except people I explicitly give it to, people who've earned that privilege. But later that evening, alone in her penthouse with city lights sparkling below like scattered stars, Nova found herself crying unexpectedly, not from grief or pain, but from the overwhelming weight of finally, truly letting go of something she'd been carrying without realizing it. The need for Patricia's approval, the desire for Michael's mother to see her worth, the fantasy of being accepted into a family that had never wanted her in the first place. She called Julian, needing to hear his voice, needing to connect with someone who'd never made her feel like she had to earn basic respect or prove her value. "How was your day?" he asked, such a simple question that felt like coming home to safety and acceptance. She told him about Patricia's visit, about the apology, about the closure she'd given herself, rather than accepting it from someone else as a gift that required gratitude. Julian was quiet for a moment, then said something that shifted Nova's entire perspective on everything that had happened. "You're magnificent, Nova. You understand that, right? The way you handled that situation, the grace you showed someone who didn't deserve it while maintaining your boundaries perfectly and protecting yourself. That's real power. Not the kind that comes from destroying others or taking revenge, but the kind that comes from being so secure in yourself that other people's opinions can't touch you anymore, can't diminish you, can't make you doubt yourself even slightly." Nova felt tears prick her eyes. But they weren't sad tears, weren't grief or pain or regret. "When you visit next month," she said softly, vulnerability making her voice shake slightly, "I want you to meet my family. I want you to meet the people who matter most to me in the world. I'd be honored beyond words," Julian replied, and Nova could hear his smile through the phone, could feel his genuine happiness at being included in this way. Maybe, just maybe, the best revenge wasn't destruction or vindication at all. Maybe it was building something beautiful in the space betrayal had cleared, creating something genuine and healthy where lies used to live. Chapter 8. The New Chapter. Julian arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, and Nova met him at the airport with butterflies she hadn't felt in years. He emerged from customs looking rumpled from the flight, his smile bright enough to compete with terminal lights. He kissed her cheek, handed her a portfolio case, and said, "I brought you something important." Inside were architectural drawings for a community center designed specifically to provide resources for women entrepreneurs. Meeting rooms for networking, workshop spaces for skill development, child care facilities so mothers could attend without choosing between education and family. Everything needed to help women build their own empires. "I designed it for you," Julian said as they walked to her car, "to honor what you've built. A space where other women can find the support to become what you already are." Nova started crying right there in the parking garage, mascara forgotten. She stood beside her car, sobbing while Julian held her. "Nobody's ever done anything like this for me," she whispered. "Nobody's ever seen me this clearly." "Then everyone before me was an idiot," Julian said simply. Meeting her family exceeded expectations. Her father talked with Julian for 3 hours about sustainable design and African architecture. Her mother kept squeezing Nova's hand, her approval radiating. Desmond and Priya invited them for game night, and the legendary moment happened during charades when Julian attempted the Lion King. He roared like he was being murdered. He mimed in ways making no sense. He flailed his arms like fighting invisible bees while having an existential crisis. He dropped to all fours and did something that might have been Simba, but looked like a medical emergency. Nova laughed so hard she couldn't breathe. Tears streaming, her stomach hurting. "Baby, what are you doing?" she gasped. "I'm being Simba," Julian protested. "That looks nothing like Simba." Desmond wheezed. "That looks like you're fighting bees while questioning every life choice." Priya had slid off her chair, laughing soundlessly. They didn't win, but Nova realized she hadn't felt joy like this in years. Real joy from being surrounded by people who loved her without agenda. Julian stayed 3 weeks, integrating into her life with natural ease. He attended galas, charming everyone. He met business partners, never intimidated by her success. He existed in her space, without trying to take up all the air. But the powerful moment came when they addressed her bedroom. Nova had redecorated the entire penthouse, except the master bedroom. She'd been avoiding it, unable to face memories soaked into the walls. Julian found her standing in the doorway one evening. Frozen. "This was where he betrayed me every night for 8 months, she whispered. "Every night I slept here, he was planning his exit. This space holds so much pain I can't walk through the door." Julian took her hand gently. "Then let's fill it with something new," he said quietly. "Not to erase what happened, but to reclaim what's yours. This is your home, Nova. He doesn't get to steal that even in memory. Show me what you want this room to be." They spent the weekend transforming it. New furniture, new paint, a deep midnight blue Nova had always loved, but Michael claimed was too dark. New art, new lighting. Julian painted one accent wall himself, getting more paint on his clothes than the surface, making Nova laugh with running commentary about how architecture and manual labor were different skills. By Sunday evening, the bedroom felt like sanctuary instead of crime scene, like possibility instead of prison. That night, lying in their transformed space, Nova felt the last wall around her heart crack open. "I need to tell you something," Julian said. "I know we're taking this slowly. I know you're still healing. But I need you to know something." Nova tensed, preparing for the other shoe to drop. "I'm falling in love with you," Julian said. "But I'm also terrified. I'm terrified that I'm a rebound, that you're using me to heal from Michael. That when you're actually healed, you'll realize I was just a bridge to your next chapter, not the chapter itself." Nova sat up, shocked. "Julian, I know it's too soon," he continued. "I know you're not ready. But I needed to be honest. I can't keep pretending I'm okay with casual when my feelings aren't casual at all." Nova felt panic rising. This was exactly what she'd feared. Pressure, expectations, someone wanting more than she could give. "I don't know what I can offer you," she said honestly. "I don't know if I can trust anyone completely ever again." I don't know if I'm capable of the kind of love you deserve. Julian nodded slowly. I understand. And maybe I need to step back. Maybe I need to go back to Bali and give you space. The thought of him leaving felt like someone had squeezed her heart. Don't go, she whispered desperately. Please don't go. Then tell me what you want, Nova, because I can't keep existing in this limbo. Nova looked at him, this man who'd shown her genuine care without demanding anything, and she realized something important. She was terrified, not of him leaving, but of him staying, of letting herself depend on someone again, of giving someone power to hurt her. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm scared that if I let myself love you, you'll destroy me the way Michael did. Then don't love me yet, Julian said gently. But let me love you while you figure it out. Let me prove I'm different, not by asking you to trust me, but by earning that trust slowly, day by day. Nova felt tears streaming. What if I can't ever trust again? What if I'm too broken? Then we'll figure it out together, Julian said, pulling her close. But you're not broken, Nova. You're healing, and healing isn't linear. It's messy and complicated. That's okay. I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to leave, Nova cried into his chest, releasing years of pain and fear and doubt. And for the first time since the wedding, she let herself believe that maybe she could try again. Chapter 9. The Reckoning. 6 months into their relationship, Julian proposed during a private dinner at the restaurant where they'd had their first real date after he moved to the city permanently for her. The ring was custom designed with meticulous care that showed in every detail a stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds, the exact same shade as the dress Nova wore the night she discovered Michael's betrayal. I want you to reclaim this color, Julian said as he knelt beside their table, his voice shaking slightly with emotion and nervousness. I want you to look at emeralds and remember not the worst night of your life, but the night someone promised to love you exactly as you deserve, the night your actual future began. Nova said yes before he finished speaking, before he could doubt himself, before fear could make her hesitate or overthink or ruin this perfect moment. The engagement announcement hit social media like a bomb detonating in a crowded space. Nova's circles erupted with enthusiastic congratulations and celebration. Business partners sent extravagant gifts. Friends hosted dinners that turned into impromptu parties celebrating her happiness. Wilma, who'd been attempting to rebuild her influencer career with modest success and dwindling followers, posted a vague quote to her considerably diminished audience. Some people move on too fast. Real love takes time to develop properly and genuinely. The comments section destroyed her within minutes, her remaining followers turning on her with savage efficiency and zero mercy. Girl, Nova upgraded to an international architect who treats her like a queen. You're posting thirst traps from your mom's basement. Please sit down and be quiet. Real love takes time. You destroyed a marriage in less than a year. Your math is as terrible as your judgment and your character. The audacity of commenting on Nova's life after what you did is truly breathtaking and shameless beyond belief. Rochelle showed Nova the post during their morning coffee meeting, both of them reading the comments with satisfaction that felt earned through surviving genuine hardship. She actually thinks she has the moral high ground here, Rochelle said, shaking her head in genuine disbelief. After everything she did, she thinks she gets to have opinions about your choices and your timeline. The funny moment came when Michael attempted to reach out to congratulate Nova on her engagement. His email hitting security filters Rochelle had implemented specifically for this purpose months ago. Rochelle's response was professional, polite, and absolutely devastating in its dismissiveness of his relevance. Dear Mr. Young, Ms. Bennett Okafor's calendar does not accommodate correspondence from irrelevant parties. We suggest you focus your energy on your own life rather than commenting on hers. Have the day you deserve. Nova actually had to set down her coffee before she dropped it, laughter making her hands shake uncontrollably. Desmond, who was visiting the office for lunch, immediately requested a copy to frame for his home office wall. But drama emerged from a source Nova hadn't anticipated, couldn't have predicted would cause problems. Patricia Young showed up at Bennett Global's headquarters again. But this time, her demeanor was completely different from her previous apologetic visit months earlier. Not remorseful at all, angry, desperate, entitled in ways that suggested she'd learned absolutely nothing from their last conversation. She demanded to see Nova loudly, her voice carrying through the lobby in ways that made security nervous, that made other visitors uncomfortable and concerned. Nova agreed to see her mostly out of morbid curiosity about what could possibly prompt this behavior. What could drive this woman to humiliate herself publicly again after their last encounter? Patricia burst into Nova's office like a storm system, her face flushed red, her hands shaking with emotion that looked like rage mixed with desperation and something approaching hysteria. "You need to help him," Patricia said without preamble, without greeting, without any pretense of civility or respect. "Michael is falling apart completely. He's barely working minimum wage jobs. He's drowning in debt. He's destroying himself, and you're the only one who can fix this situation." Nova leaned back in her chair, her expression carefully neutral, her voice utterly calm. "Mrs. Young, why exactly would I fix Michael's problems? What possible reason would I have to help him?" Because you loved him once. Because you have the resources he desperately needs. Because showing mercy is the right thing to do, regardless of what happened between you." The powerful moment was Nova's response, delivered with calm certainty that filled the entire office with authority. "Mrs. Young, when Michael destroyed our marriage, he made a choice. When he humiliated me at my brother's wedding in front of 300 people, he made a choice. Every lie he told, every betrayal he committed, every moment of disrespect was a deliberate choice he made, knowing the consequences. And now, he's living with the consequences of every single choice. I'm not responsible for rebuilding a man who tore himself down through his own actions, his own selfishness, his own short-sighted stupidity. I gave him my love, my trust, my unwavering support, and he threw it all away for an affair that lasted less time than most people's vacations. The mercy I owe him is silence. I haven't sabotaged him further. I haven't continued destroying him. I've simply moved forward with my life while he drowns in his. That's all the grace he's getting from me, and that's more than he deserves. But he's suffering terribly." Patricia shouted, tears streaming down her face, her voice breaking with genuine emotion. "So was I," Nova said quietly, her voice dropping but somehow becoming more powerful through its restraint. "I suffered while he was cheating. I suffered when I discovered him with another woman in a guest room at my brother's wedding. I suffered through divorce proceedings and public humiliation and rebuilding my ability to trust anyone. Where was your concern for my suffering? Where was your demand that Michael show me mercy or compassion or basic human decency?" Patricia had no response, no defense, nothing to say that wouldn't make her position worse or expose her hypocrisy further. "Your son is an adult who made adult choices," Nova continued, her voice steady as stone. "He chose betrayal over loyalty. He chose temporary pleasure over permanent partnership. He chose lies over honesty. Those choices have consequences. Learning to live with consequences is part of being a grown man instead of a spoiled child. I'm not his mother. I'm not his savior. I'm not his wife. I'm the woman he underestimated and betrayed. He gets nothing else from me except the gift of my absence." Patricia left in tears, her shoulders shaking, and Nova felt no guilt, no regret, only the certainty that boundaries existed for reasons and protecting them was self-care rather than cruelty. That evening, Desmond called with news that made Nova pause mid-step. Michael had been arrested for drunk driving and assault after getting into a bar fight. He'd been ranting about Nova, about how she'd ruined his life, about how she owed him something for the years he'd wasted on her. The assault charge was against a man who'd simply suggested Michael take responsibility for his own failures instead of blaming everyone else for his choices. "Let me be very clear," Nova told her brother, her voice steady as stone. "I didn't ruin Michael's life. Michael ruined Michael's life. I just stopped pretending I could fix it, or that fixing it was my responsibility. He made every single choice that led him to that bar, to that fight, to that arrest. I just made the choice to survive what he did to me." But then, something unexpected happened that shifted everything slightly in ways Nova couldn't have predicted. Wilma reached out through Priya, asking for a meeting. Not for forgiveness, the message specified very clearly, but to deliver information Nova needed to know before she married Julian and moved forward completely. They met at a neutral coffee shop, Wilma looking different from the last time Nova had seen her. Humbled, tired, but somehow more genuine, more honest, like losing everything had forced authenticity she'd never possessed before. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Wilma started before Nova could speak or interrupt. "I know what I did was unforgivable. I betrayed you, betrayed my brother, destroyed something precious for incredibly selfish reasons. I'm not here for absolution or reconciliation or anything for myself. I'm here because you need to know something about Michael before you move forward completely." Nova waited patiently, letting silence encourage continuation without demanding or pushing. "He planned it all," Wilma said, pulling out her phone with trembling hands. "Not the affair exactly, but marrying you. I found text messages from before your wedding, from before he even proposed to you. He researched you extensively, found out about your company, your wealth, your success. He planned to marry you and divorce you after enough time passed to make it look legitimate. He thought he'd find a way around the prenup, or that you'd feel guilty enough to give him money. The affair with me was just his way of checking out when he realized you were too smart to manipulate, too strong to control." She showed Nova the messages carefully. Texts from years ago, from before their relationship even began properly, showing Michael discussing Nova as a target, a mark, an opportunity to exploit for financial gain. Nova's blood went cold, her skin prickling, but her expression stayed carefully calm and controlled. "Why are you telling me this now after all this time?" "Because you're marrying someone who actually loves you," Wilma said, her voice breaking slightly with what sounded like genuine emotion. "And you deserve to know that Michael never did. He saw a business opportunity, not a partner. He saw money, not a person. He saw what he could take, not what you deserved to receive. And I was stupid enough to think I was special, when really he was just using me to exit a marriage that wasn't profitable enough fast enough. You deserve to move forward, knowing there was nothing real to mourn, nothing genuine that was lost." Nova studied Wilma's face carefully, seeing genuine remorse for perhaps the first time, seeing something that looked like actual growth and self-awareness. "I'm not forgiving you," Nova said carefully, choosing her words with precision. "What you did was calculated and cruel. You didn't just sleep with a married man. You slept with your sister-in-law's husband at your brother's wedding, at a celebration meant to honor love and commitment. That's not a mistake. That's a choice to cause maximum damage possible." Wilma nodded, accepting the judgment without argument or defense. "But thank you for this information," Nova continued, her voice softening slightly with something approaching gratitude. "It makes letting go easier, knowing there was nothing real to mourn, knowing I never actually lost anything valuable. Michael was performing from the beginning. The betrayal hurts less when I realize the person I loved never actually existed outside my imagination." She stood to leave, then turned back with words that felt important to say. "Wilma, get therapy. Figure out why you thought destroying someone else would build your own happiness. Figure out why you chose chaos over character, betrayal over loyalty, and stay away from my family permanently. That's not negotiable. That's forever." Nova left the coffee shop feeling something she hadn't expected. To feel after all this time. Complete closure that felt like freedom rather than ending not because Wilma apologized or Michael suffered, but because she finally understood with crystal clarity that her marriage had been a performance from the very beginning, and grieving a performance was wasted energy better spent building something real and lasting. That night, she told Julian everything about the messages and Michael's planning and the con she'd been living through. Julian held her while she processed it all, not offering platitudes or empty reassurances that would minimize her pain or suggest it was somehow less valid. "Does it change anything?" he finally asked. Knowing it was calculated from the start, Nova thought about it carefully, honestly processing her emotions. "It makes it hurt less, actually. I spent months wondering what I did wrong, what I could have done differently. Now I know the answer, nothing. There was nothing I could have done differently because I was never the problem. He was always going to betray me because that was always his plan. I was never his wife. I was his mark." "You're free of him now," Julian said quietly. "Completely free. Not just legally, but emotionally, psychologically. You don't have to wonder anymore." "No," Nova agreed, feeling weight lift from her shoulders like removing physical chains. "I don't. I can just move forward." And for the first time since the wedding, moving forward felt not just possible, but inevitable. Like the natural progression of a life that had survived devastation and emerged stronger, wiser, better. Chapter 10. The Queen's Coronation. The wedding took place on a private island where Julian had designed his most beautiful resort. Exactly 1 year after the nightmare at Desmond's wedding, Nova wore a custom gown that transformed her into African royalty, the fabric structured and flowing simultaneously, her natural hair adorned with gold accessories that made her look like she'd stepped from ancient kingdoms. The ceremony blended Nigerian traditions with modern elegance, creating something uniquely theirs. Desmond walked her down an aisle lined with flowers from 3 continents, squeezing her hand as they approached Julian, standing at the altar with tears streaming down his face. During their vows, Nova spoke without notes. "Julian, you loved me when I was broken. You saw past my armor to the woman who'd been hurt. You never asked me to be over it, to be healed, to be anything other than exactly who I was. You taught me real love doesn't exploit vulnerability, it protects it. Real partnership doesn't diminish, it elevates. You've given me freedom to be powerful and soft simultaneously. You've made me believe in love again, not the fairy tale kind, but the real kind. I choose you every day for the rest of our lives." Julian's vows spoke about how Nova taught him that strength and tenderness could coexist, that real love meant matching someone's energy without dimming their light. The reception brought legendary moments. Her father tried giving a speech but got too emotional. Her mother took the microphone. "Julian better treat our daughter like the queen she is, or he'll answer to me, Desmond, Priya, Rochelle, and Bennett Global Security. We're black, Nigerian, and we don't play about our Nova." The reception erupted. During father-daughter dance, Desmond cut in, then Priya, until half the wedding party was dancing chaotically. Nova laughed until her updo came loose. At sunset, Nova stood on the beach alone. She thought about where she'd been 1 year ago, betrayed, humiliated, heartbroken, and where she was now. Married to a man who cherished her, stronger than ever. Surrounded by family who fought for her, Julian found her. "What are you thinking, Mrs. Okafor?" Nova turned in his arms. "I'm thinking about how the worst thing led to the best thing. I spent 4 years trying to fix a marriage that was never real. Now I'm in one that feels like coming home. I used to believe I had to choose between being powerful and being soft. You've shown me I can be both. I'm grateful Michael showed me who he was, because it freed me to find you." They stood there as the sun set. Inside, the party continued. Her family, her friends, her empire, her joy. Nova Bennett Okafor had built kingdoms. But this, being loved exactly as she was, this was her greatest victory. The show had begun with betrayal, but it ended with triumph. Not revenge, though that had been satisfying. Not bitterness, But with Nova standing in her power, wearing her crown, holding the hand of a man who knew her worth, finally believing she deserved every bit of happiness she'd built. She'd survived the worst. She'd conquered every challenge. She'd reclaimed her joy, and now she was exactly where she belonged, powerful, loved and free.